fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The air in the Blackwood Pines was always different. It was heavy with the scent of damp earth and secrets, a thick, cloying perfume that clung to your clothes and settled in your lungs. For most of the 20-somethings spilling out of Kael's ridiculously oversized cabin, it smelled like freedom and cheap beer. For me, Elara, it smelled like a cage closing in. I leaned against the rough bark of an ancient oak, nursing a lukewarm can of something that claimed to be lager, and watched them. A bonfire roared in the clearing, its hungry flames painting their laughing faces in shades of orange and black. Maya was dancing with Liam, her wild, dark curls flying. Others were scattered on blankets, their conversations a low, meaningless hum beneath the thumping bass of a portable speaker. They were all so beautiful, so breakable. And then there was Kael. He was the heart of the party, the sun around which all these smaller planets orbited. He stood by the fire, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, gesturing with the other as he told some doubtlessly embellished story. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, the strong line of his jaw, the arrogant smirk that never seemed to leave his lips. Our eyes met across the clearing. A jolt, hot and unwanted, shot through me. His smirk widened, transforming from simple arrogance into a direct, physical challenge that seemed to tighten the very air I was breathing. He and I weren't just oil and water, we were a lit match and a puddle of gasoline. From the moment my roommate Maya had dragged me into his orbit, we'd been circling each other. It was not simple dislike. It was a low, simmering animosity that felt dangerously close to something else, something I refused to name. A hum of energy that set my teeth on edge and made the hairs on my arms stand up whenever he was near. I tore my gaze away, my fingers tightening on my can. The moon, fat and silver, was beginning to climb over the jagged peaks of the mountains. A sliver of it peeked through the dense canopy, and a cold dread, familiar and sharp, trickled down my spine. I hadn't wanted to come. I defought Maya on it for a week, but she'd worn me down. Now I was here, surrounded by oblivious lambs, and the wolf was at the door. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the firelight. It was a heavy sound, not a squirrel, not a deer. My head snapped up, my senses screaming. The party's noise faded into a dull roar in my ears. I scanned the impenetrable wall of trees, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. Another snap, closer this time. Bluntly, there are only two ways a party like this, in a place like this, can go: wacky comedy or slasher movie. And I was the only one here who knew the slasher had a specific, recurring lunar cycle. I had to get them all inside. Now, but how? I could not scream. There's a monster in the woods. They'd think I was drunk or insane. They would laugh, and then they would die. I needed a farce, a grand, idiotic, utterly believable misunderstanding. My eyes landed on a grotesquely cheerful garden gnome standing guard by the cabin's porch steps. It had a long white beard, a fishing pole, and a vacant, painted-on smile. It was perfect. Pushing off the tree, I strode into the center of the clearing, my boots crunching on fallen leaves. I snatched the gnome from its post, holding it aloft like a bizarre trophy. "All right, listen up," I shouted, my voice cutting through the music and chatter. Every head turned toward me. Kael's story died on his lips, his expression a mixture of annoyance and intrigue. "This party just got an upgrade," I announced, forcing a manic grin onto my face. "I present to you the Whispering Gnome of Blackwood." A few people chuckled. Maya shot me a look that screamed, "What the hell are you doing?" I did not care, I just needed their attention. I needed them to play along. I locked eyes with Kael again, letting the bravado wash over me. But this time I let a sliver of the genuine, cold terror I felt bleed into my gaze. His easy smirk faltered, the playful light in his dark eyes vanished, replaced by an unnerving stillness. For a split second I saw past the charming host. I saw something older, something watchful. He saw the truth in my eyes, and he knew somehow that this was not a game. "The rules are simple," I declared, projecting a confidence I was miles away from feeling. My hand was slick with sweat where I gripped the ceramic gnome. "This is Gary." I patted its stupid red hat. "Gary the gnome is the key. It's a game of reverse hide-and-seek. One person, the gnome keeper, hides with Gary inside the cabin. Everyone else counts to 100, then you come looking. Last person to find the keeper has to strip to their underwear and swim across the lake at dawn." A chorus of whoops and groans went through the crowd. The dare was just the right blend of embarrassing and legendary to hook them. Liam puffed out his chest, already sizing up the competition. Maya just shook her head, a reluctant smile playing on her lips. They were buying it. And the most important rule, I added, my voice hardening slightly, once the hunt begins, the cabin doors are locked. No one in, no one out until the keeper is found. It's to stop cheaters. And who died and made you queen of the party? Kael drawled, stepping forward. The firelight carved shadows under his cheekbones, making him look predatory. But his eyes were not on me. They were scanning the darkness at the edge of the woods. He was playing his part, but he was listening. I snapped back, meeting his gaze. Scared you'll be the one taking a polar plunge, Kael. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It was the one he used when he was about to win something. In your dreams, Elara, fine, we play your weird little game. He turned to the others. You heard her, everybody inside to count. Loser gets hypothermia. A cheer went up and the herd began to move, grabbing drinks and blankets as they shuffled toward the cabin. I felt a dizzying wave of relief. It was working. As the last person filed inside, Kael paused at the door, holding it open for me. You're first, he said, his voice a low murmur meant only for me. You made the rules. Fine, I clutched the gnome and slipped past him, deliberately avoiding the heat radiating from his body. Inside, the cabin was a chaotic mess of people shouting numbers. Kael shut the heavy oak door behind us and with a loud, definitive thunk shot the deadbolt home. He then walked over and locked the back door, his movements economical and precise. My ridiculous farce had given him the perfect excuse. 98, 99, 100, ready or not, here we come. The group scattered, their footsteps thundering through the large cabin as they began their search. I had to hide and fast. I ducked into the pantry, a narrow, dark space that smelled of spices and cedar. I wedged myself behind a stack of canned goods, pulling the door almost completely shut and plunging myself into near-total darkness. I held my breath, listening. The house fell into a tense, playful silence, punctuated by muffled whispers and the creak of floorboards. But beneath it I was listening for another sound, a scratching at the door, a howl. The pantry door creaked open. A large silhouette blocked the light from the kitchen. Found you. Kael, of course. He stepped inside, pulling the door shut behind him and trapping us together in the suffocating darkness. The space was so suffocatingly tight his arm pressed against mine, from shoulder to elbow. Heat bloomed from the contact, a potent shock that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with him. The air grew thin, heavy with the scent of cedar and something else uniquely Kael. Wood smoke, aged whiskey, and a wild, masculine musk that threatened to crawl under my skin and stay there. I could feel the warmth of his breath near my temple. He did not move to leave. He did not call out to the others that he had found me. He just stood there, his presence an oppressive weight. Cut the crap, Elara, he whispered, his voice a low vibration that I felt in my bones. What's really out there? What are you so afraid of? Before I could answer, a scream ripped through the night. It was not one of the girls inside playing around. It came from outside. It was high and thin and choked with terror, and it was cut off with a sickening, wet crunch. Silence descended upon the cabin. The playful mood vanished, instantly replaced by a cold, primal fear. Everyone froze. Then a sound from the front of the house, a low, violent scratching against the thick oak of the door. It was followed by a guttural, chest-rattling snarl that vibrated through the floorboards, a sound that had never come from a human throat. Panic was a flash flood. It hit the group all at once, a wave of shrieks and frantic questions. Someone started rattling the locked doorknob, their voice shrill with terror. What was that? Oh my God, what was that? In the pantry, Kael's body went rigid. Stay here, he commanded, his voice devoid of any of its earlier arrogance. He pushed past me, throwing the door open and striding into the chaos of the living room. I followed on his heels, Gary the gnome completely forgotten on a shelf. The scene was pure bedlam. Liam was trying to peek through the curtains, while Maya was huddled with two other girls, their faces pale masks of fear. Everyone get away from the windows. Kael's voice was a whip-crack of authority that cut through the hysteria. They stared at him, shocked into silence. He did not wait for them to obey. He grabbed a heavy armchair and shoved it against the front door, the muscles in his back and shoulders straining with an intensity that seemed almost unnatural. The scratching outside grew louder, more frantic, accompanied by a furious, slobbering growl. My own training kicked in. While Kael barricaded the front, I moved to the back, my eyes scanning the large glass panes of the sliding door that led to a deck. I yanked the curtains shut, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. We were working in tandem, an unspoken, instinctive alliance born of a shared, secret knowledge. He finished with the door and came to join me, his presence a solid wall at my back. The others watched us, their fear turning them into statues. They looked to us for answers, for safety. "You know what that is," I said, my voice barely a whisper. It was not a question. "I was hoping I was wrong," he breathed, his eyes fixed on the curtain as if he could see through it to the monster on the other side. I felt it when the moon rose, a rogue, uncontrolled. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The remote location, the locks on the doors, his watchful gaze on the woods. "This party," I started, realization dawning. "You did not throw this party to have fun." "I threw it to keep them contained," he admitted, his voice tight with a terrible burden, "to keep them in one place where I could protect them." He finally turned to look at me, his dark eyes boring into mine, filled with a century of secrets. "And you're not just some girl Maya dragged along for the weekend, are you? The way you moved, the way you looked at the tree line, you felt it too." "My family," I said, the words tasting like rust on my tongue. "We're keepers, we do not hunt, we maintain the balance. I've been tracking it for a week." The animosity that had defined our every interaction evaporated like mist in the sun. In its place was a stunning, terrifying understanding. He was not my enemy, he was the other side of my coin. We were both guardians, working at cross purposes, blinded by our mutual distrust. That simmering energy between us had not been hatred, it had been recognition. Glass exploded inwards from a window on the far side of the room. A massive, fur-covered limb, tipped with claws like black daggers, ripped through the curtains. The thing outside bellowed, a sound of pure, ravenous fury. Screams erupted again as everyone scrambled back, huddling behind the stone fireplace. Kael moved so fast I barely registered it, shoving me behind him. My front was flush against his back, a wall of hard muscle and radiating heat. The sheer, unexpected shock of his protection ward with a lifetime of training that screamed he was a danger in his own right. For a single, insane moment, I felt safer than I had all night. He looked back at me, and in the dim, chaotic light of the room, I saw it. A faint, impossible shimmer of gold blooming in the center of his irises. "It's too strong," he said, his voice a low, desperate growl. "I can't fight it like this, not in this form." He reached for the buttons on his shirt, his gaze locking with mine, pleading and commanding all at once. "You have to trust me, Elara. You have to let it see me." For a heartbeat the world stopped. The screaming of my friends, the splintering of wood, the monstrous snarls from the window, it all faded into a dull drone. All that existed was the space between Kael and me, charged with an impossible choice. Everything my family had ever taught me screamed caution, screamed danger. He was one of them. But everything my gut, my soul, screamed in that moment was to trust him. I gave him a sharp, single nod. That was all he needed. "Get them in the cellar," he ordered, his voice already changing, taking on a rougher, deeper timbre. "Now." I did not hesitate. "Maya, Liam, everyone, cellar, go." I shoved them toward the heavy wooden door set into the floor near the kitchen. They stumbled, tripping over each other in their haste, their faces a mess of tears and terror. I pulled the door open, herding them down the rickety steps into the musty darkness below. "Elara, come on," Maya cried, her hand outstretched. "I'll be right there," I lied, and slammed the heavy cellar door shut, dropping the thick iron bolt into place just as the creature finally smashed the window frame and hauled its massive, malformed body into the room. It was worse than I had imagined. Taller than a man, a hideous fusion of wolf and human, its fur matted with filth and old blood. Its yellow eyes, burning with mindless rage, fixed on me. It let out a roar, and the stench of carrion and wet fur washed over me. I backed away, my hand instinctively going to the small, silver-bladed knife strapped to my ankle. It would not be enough. But the beast was not looking at me anymore, its head cocked, its attention drawn to Kael. He stood in the center of the ruined living room, his shirt hanging open. The change was already upon him. I could hear the sickening pop and crunch of his bones reshaping themselves under his skin, his body contorted, muscles bunching and elongating. It was violent, agonizing, yet there was a strange, terrifying grace to it. This was not the chaotic corruption of the rogue. This was a deep, primal power being unleashed under duress. Fur, the color of a moonless night, sprouted across his skin. His handsome face twisted and stretched into a lupin muzzle, and the last sound he made as a man was my name, breathed out in a pained groan. Then he threw his head back and howled. It was not a cry of rage, but a challenge, a declaration of territory. The rogue answered, and the two wolves launched themselves at each other. The cabin became a maelstrom of claws and teeth, furniture splintered, lamps shattered. They were a blur of dark fur and flashing fangs, a whirlwind of primal violence. The rogue was bigger, more frenzied, but Kael was faster, smarter. He moved with a warrior's purpose, dodging and weaving, his attacks targeted and precise. I saw my chance. As the rogue lunged, exposing its flank, I drew my silver knife and darted in. I was not a warrior, but I was a keeper. I knew the anatomy. I drove the blade deep into the thick muscle of its haunch. It shrieked a sound of pain and fury and swiped at me. The claws caught my arm, tearing through my jacket and skin. I cried out, stumbling back as white-hot pain exploded from my shoulder to my wrist. The momentary distraction was all Kael needed. He lunged, his powerful jaws closing around the rogue's throat. There was a final, terrible gurgle, and the rogue's massive body went limp, crashing to the floor. Silent. The only sounds were my own ragged breathing and the heavy, lupin panting of the magnificent black wolf standing over its vanquished foe. It turned its head, and for a moment I was staring into eyes that were not gold, but the familiar, intelligent dark brown of Kael's. He took a step toward me, then seemed to think better of it, a low whine escaping his throat as he looked at my bleeding arm. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a trembling exhaustion. I slid down the wall, pressing my hand against my wound, my head spinning. I watched as the violent process of the change reversed itself, Kael's body shrinking and softening back into its human form. He lay curled on the floor, naked, trembling and bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts. The first pale, gray light of dawn was filtering through the broken window. The party was over. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself to my feet. I grabbed a tartan blanket from the back of a miraculously intact sofa and walked over to him. He looked up as I approached, vulnerable and exposed. The arrogant host was gone. The monster was gone. All that was left was the man, his secret laid bare in the wreckage of his home. I knelt and draped the blanket over his shoulders. Our eyes met, and in that gaze 1,000 things were said without a single word. Understanding, gratitude, awe, and something else, something new and fragile and fiercely potent, beginning to take root in the ruins. "Your arm," he rasped, his voice raw. "You're hurt worse," I replied softly. My hand came up, acting of its own accord, to brush a stray lock of damp hair from his forehead. His skin was fever-hot beneath my fingertips, a stark contrast to the cooling air. A tremor went through him at the contact. He did not pull away. Instead, he leaned into my palm, a soft, almost imperceptible movement, and his eyes closed for a second. It was a silent surrender, a laying down of arms that felt more intimate than a kiss. The war between us was over. The farce had shattered, and in its place, something terrifyingly real had just begun.